today, grade 11s, we are looking at consolidating all the knowledge you have on compound growth. It can be quite a daunting section. Daunting because there's so much happening. We know that so many changes can happen in investments. It's not always straightforward. Life changes, and so interest needs to change as well, of course. So things happen, money is deposited, money is withdrawn, interest rates change, the world moves on, and so our timelines are used as a tool in financial maths to help us with any compound growth question. So today, specifically, what we're going to be looking at is as many timeline questions that we can possibly get through in the session. Okay, let's have a look at question 1, and I'm going to show you quite slowly. We'll go through the question and then show you how to put this information on your timeline. Okay, so we've got 60,000 Rand, which is invested into an account. It offers an interest rate at 7% per annum compounded quarterly for the first 18 months. We've been given 3 bits of information already. We can see that we started with 16,000 Rand at time 0. The interest rate is 7% per annum compounded quarterly, but we can see that our period is given as 18 months. So that means we have to change 18 months to a number of quarters. How many quarters are there in 18 months? Let's think about that first before we move any further and do any other reading of this question. So let's start with our timeline. We don't know how long it's going to go on for because we haven't finished reading the question. So this is at time 0. We put in 60,000. I'm going to use a K to represent the 1,000. And we were told that the interest rate is 7% per annum compounded quarterly for the first 18 months. So that's for the first year and a half. So let's say we work in years. So if that's time 1, then this is going to be time 1.5. We don't usually represent the 1.5s on the timeline, but it looks like in this question we're going to need to. And we are told that the interest rate was 0.07 because it's 7% divided by 100, and it's over quarters over that period. So from the time we put the money in until this time here, our interest rate 0.07 divided by 4. Now, let's sort out what is the value of N during that first 1.5 years. So we know, think about it, 18 months is 1.5 years, and we know that 12 months make up 1 year. In 12 months, there are 4 quarters, right? And then in half a year, which is the rest of that 18 months, in 6 months, how many quarters are there? Well, if there are 4 in a whole year, then in half a year there must be 2. So therefore, in total, there must be 6 quarters in this year. Okay, so therefore, our N in this for this portion here will be 6. So all I'm trying to explain to you is how do we get from 1.5 to 6? It's the same as saying 1.5 times 4. And that will give you that N is equal to 6 during that time. Okay, so as I said, simply what you can do is just times your 1.5 years by the number of compounding periods, which is 4. 1.5 times 4 is 6, but it's also good to understand how we get to that 6. Let's go back and carry on reading. Thereafter, so after the first year and a half, the interest rate changes to 5% per annum compounded monthly. So let's just deal with that now. So now the interest rate is changing to 5% per annum. It's compounded monthly. Okay, so from this point onwards, we don't know for how long, we're going to carry on reading just now. The interest rate is changing, so I'm going to use a different color to show this new interest rate. What is the new interest rate now? It's 5% compounded monthly, so now 0.05 divided by 12. Okay. 3 years after the initial investment, 5,000 Rand is withdrawn, so it's taken out from the account. So 3 years later, so remember we started with 60,000, we went through something happened at 1.5 years, and then we go to time 2, And then time 3, this is when something's happening now. They say that we're taking 5,000 Rand out. So what I like to do is I like to use either brackets or a different color. In this case, I'm going to do both to show that 5,000 Rand is coming out of the account at time 3, at year 3. The interest rate there is still 5% compounded monthly. How much will be in the account at the end of 5 years? Now, so we know now our total time period that this is all happening is 5 years, but it's not the applicable end that we are going to use in our compound interest formula because, of course, we see that compounding changes during the year from quarterly to monthly, so we need to take into account that change. But we know that from time 1.5 till we get to the end at time 5 now, the compounding there is monthly. All right, so if we count, how much is that going to be? We're going from time 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's going to be 3.5 years where we're going to have monthly compounding. So the end that's going to, and you see, I like to sort all this out before I substitute into the formula. You don't have to do this. You can just dive in and write everything down. But my huge piece of advice to you is do the timeline. So regardless of how you approach the question from here on, make sure you use a timeline first, okay? So we sort out n, which is 3.5 times 12. Again, we're going to see what that is. Let's just quickly do it now. 3.5 times by 12. So we've got 42 compounding periods to the end of this investment. And of course, we want to know how much is going to be at the end of, in the account at the end of the 5-year period. So what I like to do is I do everything in one step. As I've said before, you don't have to do it like this. You can first find out what happens at the end of time 1.5 years and then move that to time 5 using your applicable interest rate. And then you can start again from time 2 and then subtract your 5,000 Rand and then move that as well to the end at time 5. But I'm really going to do this whole calculation all in one. Remember, when you move across on a timeline, we're going to use this formula, compound interest formula, changing I and N as we go depending on what our compounding period is. And also just remember that if you want to move from one point to another on the timeline, you simply multiply by 1 plus I and then raise to whatever the applicable power is. All right. Okay, let's start. Okay, so my final amount is going to be 60,000. And that's invested for a period of 1.5 years at 7% compounded quarterly, so it's 1 plus 0,07 divided by 4. We said that there are 6 quarters in 1.5 years, so we raise that to the power of 6. Now, at the end of 1.5 years, the interest rate applicable is no longer 7% compounded quarterly. It then becomes 5% compounded monthly. So if I'm looking from, we're going from time 1.5 to that section, so it's basically 6 months there to get from 1.5 years to 2 years. So therefore we're going to multiply this by 1 plus 0,05 divided by 12, that's your new interest rate, and we're going to raise that to the power of 6. Why 6? As I explained, we're going from 1.5 years to 2 years, there are 6 months there. All right, I'm going to move into a different color now, and let's just get rid of some of the things we no longer need. We still need that little section there, but let's just change our pen color. Oopsie, let's just get back there. We want to change to blue. Okay, now that I've sorted out what happens up until the point 2, time 2, I now need to focus on what's going to happen from time 2 to time 5. So let's see, let's move along and see what happens. So from time 2 to time 3, before that money can be withdrawn, we actually have the same, and in fact this could then be changed, because all the way from 1.5 years to time 3, we're dealing in a 1.5 year period where our interest rate is 5% compounded monthly. So what I should have done here to make less work for ourselves is say 1.5, because from 1.5 to 3, 1.5 times 12. And that's what we're going to just change that to make life easier. So what is 1.5 times 12? This is going to be 18. Of course, there's 18 months in a year. So therefore, 18 compounding periods in a year and a half, sorry. Not 18 months in a year. 18 compounding periods in a year and a half if your compounding is monthly. Okay, so we've moved now to time 3. And then at time 3, what happens? 5,000 is taken out of the account. So we minus 5,000 Rand at that point. And then this is when I say I do everything in one, because now I'm going to move that entire calculation 2 periods forward to get to time 5. So I'm stuck here at time 3. I've taken 5,000 Rand out, so I've subtracted 5,000. I now need to move to the end of year 5. So therefore I'm going to multiply by 1 plus 0,05 over 12 raised to the power of, so we've got 2 years left. 2 times 12 is 24. Okay guys, so I've made it look like a bit of a mess, but really it can all be written down in one line. You then put all of this into your calculator, and I'm going to trust you to do that section for yourself. Put all of this into your calculator, substitute, and see that you come out with a final amount of 73,762 Rand and 19 cents, corrected 2 decimal places. Okay, while you check that working, check that my answer is correct, check it on your calculator. We'll take a quick break. We're back after this.